begin?
Holy Toledo!
Wow, wasn't that fun?
Oh, well.
I gotta turn this down, Bob.
Dwellers, good morning. This is 9 to noon, and I'm Paul Allen. Nordo returns to the scene to produce. He's Mad Producer 1 via the X Machine, and we welcome you to FM 100.3 KFAN and the 9 to noon project. Anthony Edwards. Ant was looking for that highlight trifecta last night against the champions of the world, yes, the Denver Nuggets. The trifecta of highlights, the plays all the dogs around the league see, and actually put down the wireless controllers and say, damn, I mean league cred stuff. The SWATs, like the SWAT of Neesmith at Indy. Dunks, John Collins out of a basketball game at Utah. And last night, Anthony Edwards trying to hit that trifecta of highlights so all the dogs can go A. He almost won the sucker from a mile away.
Love to throw it up to the big man coming in the backcourt. Instead, they get it to Ant on the run. He's going to cross midcourt. He bowls over a defender. He rises up for a game-tying three. Came up short at the buzzer, and that would have counted. Good heavens, that was close. Anthony Edwards had a chance to tie it at the horn. But the Nuggets come away with a 115-112 victory that moves them back into first in the Western Conference standings.
Denver Nuggets are like, we ain't tripping. We have everybody right where we want them, but they almost didn't last night. That was Alan Horton on the call, and he joins the radio show today, the Timberwolves Radio Vox at about 11:35. It's not a loser's lament because of the lineup or the lineups and injuries. This gets legit. The game last night and facets of the game against the champions gets legit covenant claps for finding a way, Sand, Stifle, and Nas, to compete with Jokic on a traveling back-to-back, and you fought him right down to the wire. And you may have found a little something in Luka Garza. Good morning, Nordo.
Good morning. The fight in this team last night, and specifically a guy that's been tough on the stat sheet, tough on the eyes, shooting for up and down part. I mean, roller coaster of a year for him. Jaden McDaniels last night with those triples.
Got you.
And, you mentioned Luka Garza and kind of the balance of this team trying to find offense when Conley, you can't find him for 3.5 quarters of the game, it feels like. Then he's finally getting to the line late and shooting free throws.
Yeah.
But the bulldog in this team, the bulldog that we would usually reference to a certain guy in South Beach, Jimmy, the bulldog in this team, despite the injuries, is awesome. And lighting up Target Center, you were there, so you kind of felt that vibe. I'm watching it on couch/in bed later stages of last evening. And I mean, how electric that thing is. And you're getting paid off with a team that's fighting as hard as anybody right now surrounding, allowing Anthony to do whatever he needs to do, and he's making the plays almost every single time. It was almost in some ways disappointing that shot didn't go in. You expect it with the way he's carrying things right now. But
I thought it was a cinch when it left his hands.
But that bulldog vibe with the team is awesome right now, and the injuries suck. And when's Cat going to come back? Come on, please, Rudy, just make the floor. Can you play a game, please? Soon, we need you. But in the stead, despite a loss, very, very promising from last night.
See, with the when it's like all the dogs are watching Kenny and Charles and watching ESPN and watching all the highlights and looking at all the social media stuff. It's like when you block Neesmith's shot the way he did with Indiana, and then you dunk John Collins out of a game. I mean, how are you not going to hit that long shot to win the game against the champions and you're an injury-strapped team? Now, he didn't hit it, but that's just, we have one of those. Neesmith block, Utah dunk, game whatever heroics. The Timberwolves have one of those superstars. It's becoming abundantly apparent that we all can ride. But the Covenant collapse, along with for Jaden McDaniels, who showed an offensive pulse last evening, was Luka Garza, man. I mean, he in college he can score. Luka can shoot. He's in the NBA. Luka can score. Dealing with those Joker elbows last night, with which Luka had to deal. I mean, like the Con just said, no stifle, no Nas, and we're going against Nikola Jokic.
Do you think he sands those elbows down, sharpens them up a little bit?
I think he beats...
Cut a little deeper?
I think he beats 7.5 out of every 10 teams by the film they watch into games of those flailing, flying... whirlwind elbows.
I always love that one.
Where people see them so much, they're like, "Damn, oh, that's right. I saw this on Monday and late Sunday, and this is where it happens. I'm gonna back off." And there goes Joker kicking it out to like Kentavious Caldwell Pope or Jamal Murray, and there is your dagger. But those elbows ain't no joke, man. And so now you got, with no stifle and no Nas, and obviously no Cat, you got Luka Garza on Nikola Jokic, and it's the elbows, man, getting bumped in the key as if by a sumo wrestler. And my man did the very best he could to hold his ground. I was quite impressed. I've never really watched him play long form basketball, but here's the potential. Serendipity would be too strong of a word, because it's a positive transpiring out of a negative would mean it's negative Luka's playing, but Luka generally doesn't play that much because other people play before him, but they're hurt right now, so Luka gets a chance to play. So serendipity works in low-key fashion because he's a natural scorer. With the right lineup, think about this, man. I mean, as we move forward, with the right lineup, ain't nobody guarding Luka Garza from deep. Hey, you see where I'm going here, right? Under the cover of darkness, postseason. Who? What? Where? 6 what? Kareem Rush? Who? I mean, there may have been Micah Nori, assistant coach, joins 9 to noon about 10 minutes from now. I'm just wondering if there's a little found gold in this Luka Garza 3-point game. Now, I mean, he missed a fair amount, but in watching the lineups with Garza, the ball movement, where the defense goes, and how their version of Jaden McDaniels gets like the best offensive threat. I mean, Luka's wide open for all these threes. What if he's wide open for those threes in the postseason and the Wolves go to bumping somebody because of Luka Garza? Might have been some found gold there. McDaniels continued to frustrate, but then did some big things late. That was really cool. Crowd was behind him, too. These were the champs, man. And the Wolves being down Nas and the defensive player of the year to be almost nipped those suckers at the wire. Really like this team and the coaching staff, the tenacity, the fight, like Nordo just said. With the Timberwolves, we howl like this today. Assistant coach Micah Nori, next segment, and that's going to take place probably about 8 minutes from now, and then Radio Vox Alan Horton closes the bid around 11:35. Now, in between, we offer the Scribe and Vikes Bites and the state of the North and the enemies at this stage of the free agency equation. And that will include Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, making play after play after play after play after play after play after play. It just never stops. Yet yesterday, we saw at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, actually on Monday, we saw welcome Jonah Williams.
Yeah, on the big screens.
On the big screen, and it was just like a visit, but visits turn into signings these days. I mean, it's like we're there at 7 a.m., and the defensive tackle who played for the Rams was signed like 7 hours later. Defensive tackle from the Rams, Jonah Williams.
Well, see, that's the thing, though, is I was still wiping the sleep out of my eyes and getting frisked by security. I thought it was the tackle.
Yeah.
I'm like, do we have an offensive line issue here? What's good? Jonah Williams?
Crazy.
Oh, it's the D-line guy.
Kwesi, crazy.
Welcome to the Covenant.
And yesterday, veteran corner Shaq Griffin has now joined the Covenant. Shaq Griffin, who knew? Congratulations. Never picked chains, but still got the money 3 times. Shaq Griffin beat the Minnesota Vikings all 3 times he played them, 2018, 19, and 20, but never picked chains. When do we start wondering about kicker? Feels like Greg Joseph isn't the main play. What's up with the TikTok kicker? 11 and 23, all these signings, coercing. Kwesi's coercing Aaron Jones to play here like 5 minutes after he's released by the green and gold. Vandermeer, the Texans Vox, he was on the radio show yesterday while you were away. And basically, I mean, as Kwesi just can't control himself right now, and he's just bringing in player after player after player after player after player, the Texans Vox Vandermeer yesterday basically made Blake Cashman sound like a cross between Luke Kuechly and Ray Lewis.
I always love that one.
Year 3 for the GM, man. It's it's year 3 for the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah regime.
Had Shaq hadn't been signed by the time you had Vandermeer on, right? Because he spent
O'Neal or Griffin?
Yeah, Griffin was with them half the season last year, something like that.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
He was with the Panthers and Texans last year, so there's a connection via agents. There's a connection and maybe a mutual respect between Mr. Flores and Mr. D'Amico Ryans down in Houston.
Right.
Because we are just absolutely all in on some of their defensive playmakers from a year ago.
I know. Shaq Griffin, the newest veteran to join the Covenant. So year 3 for the GM in closing. And I mean, he's firing like, hey, if this isn't the role for me, I'm going down firing.
The GM is Kwesi.
And if somebody's firing the way main man is, the silver bullet is the one he needs to strike, and strike right between the eyes. The quarterback. 5 weeks from tomorrow. That's the monster to slay with the silver bullet, which is still in the holster, preparing for the chamber. The quarterback in 5 weeks. That's the A topic. TimberTech, TimberTech.com. Thank you for the What's on Deck 9 to noon. Nordo produces, and I'm Paul Allen. Good morning. When we return, Micah Nori, assistant coach for the Minnesota Timberwolves, amplifies the presentation. After that, Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, and then the scribe, Ben Gessling from the Star Tribune. He stops by the studio at about 10 o'clock. His cohort at the Strib, Marcus Fuller, who covers Gophers basketball and college basketball. He'll help us with those NCAA tournament brackets at about 11 o'clock. Good morning. This is 9 to noon.
You homer! Jokic goes to work on Luka Garza. Out it comes to KCP. They get it back to Jokic. Knocked away by Garza from behind. Ant's got the ball in the front court. He'll stop. He'll pop for the lead. Yes! 2:15 left to go in the third, and the Wolves have taken the lead.
Alan Horton, radio play-by-play voice for the Minnesota Timberwolves, joins 9 to noon in a couple of hours. But joining us now is Timberwolves assistant coach Micah Nori. Micah, Paul Allen, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your patience waiting through that break. They, the squad, your squad, the team, they fought gallantly last night, and seriously, that's not a loser's lament because I mean you're down key guys on that back-to-back. The champions were rested and healthy, and other than the Kyrie bad beat over the weekend with the left-handed runner, you almost nipped them at the wire. So it's not a loser's lament. Great fight last night. I know you didn't get the money, and that's what it's all about. But what do you think? And good morning.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that obviously, you know, the way the schedule plays out, it's just one of those things where we're on the back-to-back and they're rested, but everybody has those over the course of 82. So guys are used to that. But I think especially they came out, kind of punched us in the mouth there early, went up 18 in the first half, and we really couldn't get many stops. Give up 70 points, and then Coach Finch did a great job. I mean, he always does. But just talking to the guys about, you know, we just didn't feel like we were competing as well as we should. You can look and have every excuse in the world if you want to, but bottom line is we got to compete. And I thought the guys came out that second half, especially the start of that third quarter, and then pretty much the rest of the way. Just you know, you give up 70 points in the first half and only 42 in the second. So obviously the intensity stepped up and gave ourselves an opportunity right there at the end.
After he swats Neesmith the way he does a couple of weeks ago, Anthony, and then he dunks John Collins out of a game. I mean, how's he not going to hit that long shot at the end? I mean, when it left his hands, I thought it was going to go in because he's just on fire right now with stuff like that. But well, the Edward shot at the end, like when it left his fingers, did you think it was going to go in?
Absolutely. It kind of gave me a little bit of PTSD, if you will, Paul, like from I think it was Game 5 out in Denver last year where he had the three that, and that was an angle that we could see directly down the floor from our bench that looked every bit online and in and just hits the back iron. So pretty reminiscent of that. But yes, obviously when it left his hand, I thought we were going to overtime.
And Micah, that fascinating game also in that there were times, even in the second half when you guys made that big run, man, it just looked like your guys, it's late season, it's a back-to-back, you were on the road for about 2 weeks. It looked like some of your guys lost their legs and the whole thing was just going to go the wrong way again. Then they'd create turnovers and hit big shots and boom, right back in it. I mean, that just plays into that fight, but you know there specifically with Anthony, man, into the first half, he was gassed. The guys got tired last night and pushed through, right?
Absolutely. They did. And I think that, you know, shout out to Jaden McDaniels, made some huge shots, did a great job of chasing Jamal Murray all night long. It was good to see the impact that he had on the game, and just everybody that got in obviously contributed. But, you know, you hate to use an excuse, but obviously there is some fatigue. And the one thing that, even when you're down guys, obviously that hurts. But the other thing is guys get extended minutes, and that leads a little bit to that fatigue at this late in the year. But just a lot of guts I felt that they showed to compete and come back in a game when being down as much as we were and being down guys, they easily could have said, you know what, let's just mail it in and we'll come back out. We got, you know, big one on Friday, Cleveland, a couple more at home. We'll get those. But the way that they fought back and was a tribute to them.
And you might have found something with Garza from three, right? I mean, moving forward, even when Stifle Tower and Nas are back, who knows with Cat. But did you see something in Luka last night where you're like, you know, we might have found something in limited minutes from 3-point range to like help the squad moving forward?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that Luka does, we always know he could score the basketball, and what you're looking for, especially heading into the playoffs and all that, is guys, and not that specialists, because when you say specialists, it sounds like guys are limited, but you know, a guy that can come in, he can pick and pop, he can make a three. We found something in the second half with him defensively where we just put him up more in pick and roll, and that created some of those turnovers. So just the bits and pieces where as you get into playoff series, and you know, obviously you're dealing with injuries, if you can insert a guy and he can bring something positive, obviously that's huge, and that just builds confidence for him and continue to expand his role.
And obviously, you know, from yours truly, this has a little dreamscape to it, but nevertheless, it's casting the gaze forward, man. I mean, like you said, Luka's a natural scorer from out there, and with the right lineup or lineups, it just seems like he's going to be one of the guys, if not the guy, to be left open. I mean, like, certainly not in the class at this stage of Jalen Williams from OKC, but maybe he's like your version of Jalen Williams light from under the cover of darkness, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and he's been around now for 3-4 years, obviously, so he's more comfortable and he's kind of finding his niche, if you will, and comfortable with us. We're obviously very comfortable with him. Coach Finch, very comfortable putting him in the basketball game and letting him go. And I think he was able to get up 11 shots last night, 8 of which were threes, which is what he's able to do. And he's always going to rebound and play hard. So the more of those assets, if you will, that can help you win basketball games, shoot, that's huge for us.
Jokic finished with a season-low 2 assists, and he didn't get those assists until the middle of the fourth quarter. How did that happen?
Well, I told him after the game because he's a selfish player. He doesn't pass to anybody anymore. So, no, he's one of those guys that I think a couple of things. One, we were double teaming him early on, so he'll kick it out, and then with the smaller lineup, we were able to fly around a little bit more. And what that does is when you're rotating, so when he passes it out, not to get too much into the weeds, but when he passes it out and we rotate, then that guy's usually, instead of shooting it because there's someone there, is passing it, so that nullifies an assist. And then the other thing he was doing is I think he took a lot of shots. He normally doesn't take as many shots as he did, and he'll pass those off. But at the end of the day, I thought the guys did a good job of flying around and contesting and everything else. And what we kind of tried to do was Nikola Jokic is either going to score 35 to 40, or he is going to contribute by assists and all that to those points. So what we try to do is, hey, look, the 40 points that he's going to give them, whether it's through assists or points, all right, chalk that up. But we have to find a way to slow down Jamal Murray, slow down Michael Porter, and we did a good job of that until that stretch in the fourth when Michael Porter kind of went on his own 7-0 run a little bit and got hot there from, I think he had 10 points in the fourth quarter. So try to let, obviously we want to make it difficult for Nikola, but chalk up what he's going to give them, but try and take away everything from everybody else.
Micah Nori, assistant for Chris Finch and the Minnesota Timberwolves, 9 to noon. It's 9:27. Wolves get the Cavs at Target Center Friday, and it's a 7 o'clock game. Timberwolves.com if you're interested in tickets. Back to Joker just to wrap this thing up here. Just time for 2 more. He's so playful sometimes, and I've seen it in other games. It's like just let me lay it out like this, Micah. Do you believe at times during games Nikola Jokic can be a playful type individual?
I would say yeah, but I would say that, but not to the point where it's detrimental to him or his team. I think the one thing that he is like all these guys, he's not the only one, but all these professionals, and especially these really good ones, he's a guy that can kind of walk that line. Like some guys need to stay locked in and focused, like that game face, if you will, that everybody talks about, and stay that and just go about their business. He's a guy that his personality is such as that he's a friendly guy, he's a talkative guy, and to be honest, PA, he's so skilled, like you say, whether you make him pass, whether you let him shoot and he's so skilled and so efficient that he really just lets his personality carry over, and it doesn't really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't affect him, if that makes sense. There's certain guys that, they need to go about their business, militant style, not talk this and basically make everybody an enemy, if you will. But he's not like that at all, and it doesn't affect his game.
Right, and I'm glad you went down that road. And I'm probably wrong with this, man, but it was right in front of your bench. It looked like a designed love tap on former teammate Monte Morris's chin with one of his flying elbows. I mean, there was no argument. He helps him up, no harm despite the foul. I was like, is Joker out there teasing an old friend? I mean, what's going on here? That's what I mean with like playful. He does stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that, and kind of to that point, I mean, it's like that thing, I don't know if it's the saying, and I don't know if it even applies here, but like the friends close, enemies closer type thing, where he wants everybody to think he loves them and he's his buddy, but then he's like an assassin to that type of thing. Like, he hits him right in the face, which might have been just as hard, if not worse, than when Rudy got called for the flagrant against Allen. But because he picks him up and he's a joyful guy and he's a teammate and he pats him on the backside, it's just a regular foul. We don't need to take a look at it. But so to that point, though, but you're absolutely right. And that's where some guys, and Nicola being one of them, that they can go about carrying on conversations and being jokingly, if you will, or whatnot, but still make sure they take care of the task at hand, which is basketball games.
You think you think Rudy and/or Nas will be playing soon, Micah?
I think that they'll both be playing soon. I don't know if it'll be, in the next 2 games. Hopefully, we'd love to have them back, but I think that both of them, I don't want to assume too much or put much pressure on them, but I think that we should be getting them back pretty soon. But but a credit to the depth that we have, a credit to our guys. That's been, and I know it gets overused in sports, but that next man up mentality. And and the one thing is, and knock on wood right now, I mean, everybody's contributing, but as long as number 5 is running around for us, we're always going to have a chance.
All right, last one. Cleveland's here Friday. Are you going to slide Finchy some cool Cavs busting plays, given you head coached against them a couple of Fridays ago out Cleveland way?
Well, I hope not, because we lost that game, PA, as you know. But I think that, Finchy will be good having, him back on the sidelines. And it's probably, Cleveland will probably be disappointed that it'll be Finchy back there and not me again. But at any rate, it'll be good to get them back in here, especially that's the one thing I do like about the way the schedule is. That sometimes, like you look at Toronto, we played them game 1. We don't play them again until game daggone near 75. But to play a team like Cleveland, in their place and lose, and it's fresh, like we know what they do, and you just kind of, it's one of those things that as the season drags on, it's one of those games that it just means a little bit more when you play them that quickly together, and it's just, so it's a good situation for us, I feel.
Micah, you are fantastic. Thank you very much for jumping into the radio show. Best of luck against the Cavs and Pistons and Warriors and everything else coming up. God bless, brother, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Always good to catch up with you. Thank you, PA.
Yep, see you, bud. Micah Nori. That's an assistant for Chris Finch for the Minnesota Timberwolves, chatting about the gritty loss to the Denver Nuggets last evening, and that took place at Target Center. And just quickly, our best 46 seconds on this. I'm the idiot. Okay, I'll just concede. I mean, I can't get anybody to buy into my Luka Garza playoff. Got him right where you want him. Piece of serendipity where, I don't know, man. I mean, like Kareem Rush back when the LA Lakers bounced the Minnesota Timberwolves with the MB3. Sam Cassell with the bad back. You got Spree and you got KG. And like Kareem Rush on those Kobe teams, Kobe Shaq teams, whatever, it's Kareem Rush, man. I mean, now granted, he would light it up at Kansas for sure, like Luka Garza did at Iowa, and didn't play a ton in the NBA. And now all of a sudden, Kareem Rush is hitting 6 3-pointers and bouncing the Timberwolves from the Western Conference Finals. What I'm saying is stuff like that happens out of nowhere with players few have heard of at key times in like 12 to 15 minutes, and Luka can shoot. Luka's very, very comfortable chucking up those 3-point shots, man. I'm just saying the Timberwolves with their 3-point game off the bench ain't the greatest in the history of the NBA.
No.
And
it's been a multi-year conversation.
And I'm not trying to be, Jeff or Stan Van Gundy here, but I'm thinking, I look at the threes or lack thereof off the bench, and I know what I saw last night, and I'm like, that might not be found gold. It might be found bronze. But nevertheless, it's found, and I don't know. I think me and then you a half. I think we're the only like 1.5 in that covenant right now.
Well, I gotta be honest with you. Please don't include me in the Luka Garza idea. Because you're pulling this. By
I know
the way,
he can't play defense. So let me. Okay,
he was
I know
2 of 8 from deep last night.
Yeah.
A couple of them probably were ill-advised. The point of where you're going with this is sacred because we need a guy.
Yes.
Every team you mentioned the Shaq and Kobe teams.
I'm forward thinking.
Robert Horry, the Derek Fishers, those types of guys that you're not winning titles because of them, but actually technically you're not winning titles without him either.
Go ahead and say he's not the next Steve Kerr. Go ahead.
Hardcore football.
Mike Florio, Paul Allen, what's going on this Wednesday? How are things?
How are you, Paul?
Pretty good, my brother. Is it still profootballtalk.com? I mean, rules the roost. Just mashing on that F3 refresh key pretty much through like right now. I mean, because there's been so much action specifically with the Minnesota Vikings. Has it slowed down a little bit for PFT from a free agency standpoint?
Oh, it's absolutely slowed down. Look, the first couple of days, breakneck pace, deal after deal after deal. Then we get to the second phase where it's a lot of one-year deals signed by guys who didn't get the long-term offers they thought they would get. And then we morph into the third phase, which consists of a lot of who the F is that guy contracts. So, a lot of guys that unless you are a very ardent follower of his prior team, you really don't even know who the guy is. Those are the guys who are changing teams. Now, there's still a few big names out there. There are some deals that come in at a value much less than what the folks who traffic in trying to be first have reported. The most recent example, and I'm working on this now, the other day, Chase Young, the pass rusher, $13 million fully guaranteed. Multiple reporters, fully guaranteed $13 million. Jonathan Jones of CBS has the numbers. It isn't $13 million fully guaranteed. Right. It isn't. And they just pass along the BS, and they know that a certain amount of what they get from the agent is going to be BS, and they just don't care. And they knowingly and or at least recklessly pass along false information. And the audience doesn't seem to care. If the audience cared, they would do something about it, but it's just part of the hazard of being at the tip of the spear when it comes to getting the information out there before anyone else.
Around here, Mike Florio, profootballtalk.com, NBC's Football Night in America, also an author. His most recent book called Father of Mine, and you can learn more about that at profootballtalk.com.
Sequel's coming, too. I'm working on the sequel. A lot of editing that needs to be done, a lot of work and effort to get it perfect,
Sweet.
To clean it up, to make sure it works, to make sure there's no flaws in the plot. I hope to get it out when football season rolls around, but I got a lot of boxes to check between now and then.
That'd be well timed. Now, locally, Kwesi and crew, I said earlier, they've been amazingly aggressive this free agency period, and the whopper was Friday when the Vikings acquired Houston's first. So Minnesota now is 11-23. I mean, what do you think about all that?
They're going to move up and take a quarterback. The question is, how high are they going to go, and which quarterback do they want?
Right.
And what will Kevin O'Connell then be able to do to turn that guy into a high-end player? And look, here's the reality. Look at 2021 draft class. Trevor Lawrence, maybe a franchise quarterback. We don't know for sure yet. Year 3 was kind of a mixed bag. Year 2, it looked like he was on track. Year 1 was Urban Meyer debacle. Pick number 2 that year, Zach Wilson, disaster. Pick number 3, Trey Lance, disaster. Then Justin Fields, ultimately disaster when you look at what the Bears got for him. Mac Jones, Pro Bowl first year. Matt Patricia takes over the offense, disaster. These guys who are coming into the NFL, whether it's Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., they need to be looking at where they're going to go. And there's 2 teams in the top 11 where you can look at it and say there's a head coach there who is a proven developer and maximizer of quarterbacks. Brian Daboll with the Giants at 6th overall, and Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings at 11 overall with the 23rd pick that will allow them to move up. And to the extent that anybody is thinking about making a power play, and I don't know whether anybody is, because you need to do it subtly, you need to do it carefully, you don't want to be a pariah, you don't want to be vilified, you don't want to create a bunch of enemies before you even enter the NFL. But, man, if I'm a quarterback and I'm looking at all these teams with defensive head coaches like the Bears at 1 or the Commanders at 2 or the Patriots at 3, and I know that if I go there and do well, the offensive coordinator I worked with my first year is going to be gone. He's going to be a head coach. Maybe I get 2 years out of him. C.J. Stroud's looking at that in Houston. Bobby Slowick's going to be gone after this year, all thanks to C.J. Stroud. You can have this revolving door of offensive coordinators instead of being joined at the hip with a head coach who has proven. And you look at the straw that Kevin O'Connell has turned into gold. Getting the most out of Kirk Cousins, turning him into a stone-cold killer. Josh Dobbs comes in, and he's great. 400 passing yards in one game out of Nick freaking Mullins. If I'm one of these quarterbacks, I'm very attracted. I'm not answering your questions. I know I'm going off on a separate tangent here. If I'm one of these young quarterbacks, I am saying, man, there's a lot of places I could go, and my career can get wrecked. You think Zach Wilson would have had his career wrecked if he'd have been the guy that went to the 49ers in 2021? We need an alternate universe to prove it, but, man, if I'm one of these young quarterbacks, I want to go to the place where the head coach has already shown he knows how to take a quarterback and turn him into a great player, and I don't have to worry about him leaving once I become a great player.
That's brilliant. Okay, so let's unpack this. I want to begin with Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay, the Ohio State wide receiver, like at the scouting combine, is not working out at the Ohio State Pro Day. On the surface, what do you think of that?
Well, I think there's a real concern that Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't going to be the first receiver taken because, as Chris Sims pointed out, and Chris Sims has him as number 3 behind the 2 LSU receivers. If you don't have incredible acceleration and straight line speed, you're not going to run past defensive backs. And in studying his film at Ohio State, that was Chris's big takeaway. He doesn't run past the defensive backs. He doesn't have that explosion. So if you're already kind of loosely cemented in at the top of the draft and you can't do anything to help yourself, well, you know, a 4.6 in the 40 is going to hurt you. And I'm not saying he would have run a 4.6, but that would hurt you. And if you don't have that explosive straightaway speed, why bother? Why even put that number out there? So he's not going to have a number from the combine. He's not going to have a number from the pro day. He is resting on what he's done on film. But when the people closely study the film, and it's not just Chris, I'm starting to hear that teams have Malik Neighbors from LSU ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. We've just been led to believe, and Paul, this happens so often. The folks out there, most of the folks out there, and I'm not going to name names, but it's most of them. The draft experts aren't doing their own evaluation of talent. They are basing their boards on what they read, what they hear, what they see, and they put their draft boards together based upon what they think the teams are going to do. And when you have a name like Marvin Harrison with a junior at the end, you get pushed up the board. You get viewed more highly by the folks out there who aren't doing their own independent evaluations. And then comes, as we get closer to the draft, and you hear guys are rising up the draft boards. There's 2 ways guys rise up the draft board. One, the coaches are involved now, and they're saying to the scouts, what the hell are you doing here? What were you thinking about this guy? He needs to be more highly regarded. Number 2, the people who base their boards on what they hear from scouts and agents are catching up to reality.
Right.
That's when a guy rises up the draft boards. So Malik Neighbors over the next month, Paul, is going to be rising up the draft boards. In other words, the people who do the retail draft industrial complex rankings who aren't doing their own analysis are starting to realize they've been wrong all along.
Florio. Now, Arizona needs a receiver like it needs to breathe. So whether it's the LSU kid, Marvin Harrison's kid, no matter, it's getting that 4 from them, I think is going to be incredibly difficult. And they also have they have 6.
I disagree. I think the 4 is one of the target zones because Monty Austinforth, the GM of the team, sorry to interrupt you, it's your show, but he comes from that New England hive where let's trade down, let's maximize picks. They're lottery tickets. I would rather address receiver needs later. I don't want to take a shot on Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4 or Malik Neighbors or anybody at 4. Let me go back. Let me get somebody later. Let me get more ammunition. Let me make the team better in all the other areas where it needs to improve. I think 4 is one of the action zones. I think 3 is one of the action zones, and maybe even higher depending upon what Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels ultimately decide to do. One of these years, one of these guys is going to say, at first privately, and if not privately, they'll say it publicly, I don't want to play for the team that has the first overall pick in the draft, and if you're going to draft me, I'll just sit out and live off of my NIL money. That's the big factor that changes everything. You got guys that don't need a year of NFL revenue because they got money in the bank from NIL.
Right, and off that, I mean, it's a tentacle to what we're talking about. But, I mean, if you're like Caleb Williams and you don't want to play for the Bears or whomever, playing for whomever, okay, the NIL and the 3, 4, 5, 10 million, whatever, can set you up for a little while. But what are you going to lose by not playing the game for a year? You know what I mean?
Oh, you potentially lose a lot, and you're taking a hell of a risk. Yeah. And it may be that somebody calls your bluff, and you do have to sit out for the whole year. But think of it this way. Do I want to be the team, if I'm the Bears, am I taking Caleb Williams first overall if he tells me privately he doesn't want to play for me?
Right.
And that he's going to sit out the whole year if I draft him. Do I want to play that game, or do I just take Jaden Daniels instead? You know, back in 2012, when the Colts had the first overall pick, and there were people out there who thought Robert Griffin III was actually a better prospect than Andrew Luck, and Griffin was the offensive rookie of the year in 2012, not Luck. And Griffin, who knows, may have had a higher upside if he didn't have that horrible knee injury, first against the Ravens, and then he came back and played on it, and it went completely kaflooey, that's a technical term, against the Seahawks in the playoffs that year. RG3 didn't want to go to Indianapolis. So when it was time for the Colts to invite him in for a visit or a private workout, he just said no. And that never really got publicized, and they had Luck, so it didn't matter. Like it wasn't like the only guy they could take was RG3. So they settled in on Luck, and we never really know that RG3 wasn't interested in the Colts. He wanted to go to Washington. Greater potential for off-field earnings there, I think, was part of the factor. And so I guess my point is there are ways for these guys to exercise their leverage, and the question then becomes, do the teams want to take the chance of doing a Bo Jackson? Remember, Bo Jackson in '86 told the Bucks, don't draft me, I'll go play baseball. They took him with the first overall pick. He went and played baseball, re-entered the draft the next year. The Raiders took a flyer with a seventh rounder, and they got a guy who was a great running back until he had that hip injury that ended his career.
How blatant were and this is for those who may have missed it with ProFootballTalk.com. I mean, I followed all of these potential tampering stories, and they're fascinating the way you laid these things out. So I'll put it out like this. How blatant, in your estimation, were the Falcons regarding alleged tampering with Kirk Cousins? And I ask it that way because you've done this more than 2 decades, man. And when somebody like you says to the effect, you've never seen such unabashed cavalier tampering ever, that resonates with me. What do you mean?
Well, look, tampering is part of the free agency process. It's been part of the free agency process. There have been situations where, back before they had the legal tampering window, clock strikes 12 on a midnight, and within a half hour, a multi-million-dollar deal is negotiated from scratch with no prior communication of any kind whatsoever between the team and the player. That's baloney. I was on a podcast yesterday with Amy Trask and Susie Schuster. What the Football is their podcast. And Amy Trask was telling the story about when she was the CEO of the Raiders. The period opens, free agency begins, and 15 minutes later, a guy's sitting in the office who is a free agent who lives on the other side of the country. How did this happen that he's here 15 minutes into this process when there's supposed to be no communication ahead of time? But as long as it's done discreetly, and we know what happens at the scouting combine, that's tampering central because there's no digital evidence. It's agents who are in town meeting with the representatives of the teams, and the teams say, we're going to be interested in this guy, we're going to be interested in that guy, we're going to be interested in this guy, and then the negotiations happen afterward, and people are very discreet and non-obvious about it. With this Falcons thing, it first started to percolate for me when I thought, how did they get to the point in 2.5 hours where they're comfortable giving this guy who's coming off of a torn Achilles tendon $100 million fully guaranteed? How did they get the medical evidence and process it and get the owner to say, okay, go ahead and commit 9 figures to a 35-year-old quarterback who has a torn Achilles tendon, and all we've seen is him taking drops at quarter speed on a tennis court. That's all we've seen publicly.
Yeah.
They had to have gotten some information ahead of time to get to that level of comfort. And they recruited him ahead of time. And the thing to me is, and God bless his heart, Kirk Cousins, they apparently didn't talk to him about what he should and shouldn't say publicly because we know it was blatant because he has his introductory press conference last Wednesday, Paul, and he gives it all up.
Right.
He admits that he spoke to the head athletic trainer on Tuesday.
Yep.
That is a clear violation. You can't do it.
Right.
He has stepped right into it. He started to say meeting with before saying calling the head athletic trainer. It's possible he met with the head athletic trainer. He talked about discussing things with Ryan Pace, the team's director of player personnel. If that happens during the 52-hour negotiating window, that's a problem. He even said he was involved in negotiating and closing the deal with Darnell Mooney. So they've tampered so effectively and thoroughly with Kirk Cousins that they enlist Kirk Cousins to tamper with Darnell Mooney. It's unbelievable how many different layers and levels. And then the Kyle Pitts angle. Yeah. He admitted that Kyle Pitts was recruiting him for weeks. It's one thing for a player to, on his own, try to recruit another player, but if it's done at the behest of the team or with the knowledge of the team, that's a problem. And, Paul, I think that the fact that Kirk said all these things so openly at his press conference, unprompted, he wasn't grilled, there was no hot light involved, he just blurted it all out. That tells me there was a level of carelessness here that's going to result in, if the league looks for it, a digital paper trail that is going to be a treasure trove of evidence of tampering. With Cousins, with Mooney, multiple examples, multiple situations, and the question becomes, how aggressive is the league going to be in punishing them, and will the Vikings get something on the back end for it? We've seen tampering punishments where the team that was the victim of it doesn't get anything, and we've seen tampering situations where they do get something. It'll be interesting to see if, when this is all said and done, the Vikings get something from the Falcons for this blatant tampering with Kirk Cousins.
PFT. All right, last one. Justin Fields and the ham sandwich that was required to attain Justin Fields. Is there any chance the Steelers traded for said quarterback to flip him to a team that gets shut out like on draft week and looking for a quarterback?
Well, I don't know that it would happen then, but that's one of the points that we made in the aftermath of this, with the Bears giving away Fields for a 2025 sixth-round pick that becomes a fourth-rounder if he takes 51% of the snaps, or if he's on the field for 51% of the snaps this year, because I think we will see him in other packages at other positions with the Steelers. They could, if we get into the season and Russell Wilson is just lighting it up, and they've tried some of these sub-packages and it's not really working, and a starting quarterback gets injured elsewhere, and that team says, we'll give you a second-round pick for Justin Fields, yes, it's entirely possible it will happen. Someone explained it to me the other day this way, and I think this makes a lot of sense. Teams view their draft capital far differently at this stage of the calendar than once we get into the season. And the analogy I thought of was, it's the difference between thinking about going to the casino and spending your money and actually standing at the craps table. When you're at the table, that money has a different feel to it. When you're in the season and you're trying to win games and you're thinking about whatever draft pick you have to throw onto the table to go all in to try to win, you'll do it. Now, hey, these draft picks are sacred commodities, and you think of them very differently. And every player, every last dollar is something that has infinite value to you. That goes out the window when you start playing games. And I think that's the difference here. And I also think one of the reasons the Bears did right by, air quotes, Justin Fields, they want Caleb Williams to think that they will do right by him if and when the time comes for something to be done that would be regarded as doing right by Caleb Williams. And if they screw around with Justin Fields at a time when Caleb Williams is in a position to say, I don't really want to play for the Bears, that could be a factor that makes him say, yeah, you know what, I really don't want to play for the Bears.
Thanks for the contribution, my brother. I appreciate you, and I'll call you next week, all right?
All right, buddy. See you.
Mike Florio, PFT. Yeah, you know we, ProFootballTalk.com. Now, into the second portion of the radio show. The scribe, Ben Gessling from the Star Tribune, has been on fire with his reporting through all this free agency in the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll get the verbal version next on KFAN.